Canada's economic engine has been revving in the West, along with the political power that goes with it. But as Western economic fortunes have turned, so has attention, with more political eyes focused on the strategic battleground of Ontario. Joining us now for more on this power shift in the nation's capital, there's John Ivison, political columnist with the National Post. And with us here in studio, Anna Esselmont, political scientist at the University of Waterloo, and Marit Stiles, former strategist who's worked in the back rooms in a dozen campaigns at all three levels of government. And we're happy to welcome everybody to our broadcast tonight. Let's just start, John, with you in Ottawa. We've seen oil prices going down. We have seen the loonie going down. The federal budget is now being delayed as they try to figure out what the new numbers are going to be. Ontario is obviously always important because we got a lot of seats here in this province, but we're going to have even more seats going forward. And given all of the events of the past few months, do you think that makes Battleground Ontario even more important than it usually is?
Absolutely. I mean, I think we saw this week already with, I'm calling it the squeezed middle class, because the middle class is being squeezed by all three major political parties. And in fact, Mr. Harper had a speech this week, so did Tom Mulcair, and so did Justin Trudeau. And the idea of the middle class, which I think means basically if you're not in jail and your name is not Thompson, Irving or McCain, you're in the middle class. They're basically trying to woo you with whatever they've got on offer. And obviously the seat count is highest around Toronto and in Toronto and in the Golden Horseshoe. So yeah, Ontario is key to everybody's plans right now.
Well, we have nobody in this program named Thompson, Irving or McCain, I think, so you're all middle class people. Let's follow that up. Marit, Battleground Ontario, more important now because of all those factors?
Hey, isn't Ontario always the center of the universe? I mean, come on, right? But when it comes to elections, Ontario is always an important focus for all parties because it's so vote-rich, as you pointed out. And with the boundary changes, there's more seats here than ever. So it's no question that the parties would have been looking here anyways. But with the loonie kind of slumping, I think that things like the manufacturing sector in Ontario are becoming a greater focus for all three parties. So it's not so surprising, I think, that we're seeing more attention, especially over recent weeks here. And I think we'll continue to see that over the next few months until we hit that magic election day.
Anna, what's your view on this?
Yes, I agree with both John and Marit that I don't think Ontarians are used to being important in elections. So in terms of some of those economic shifts, we expect parties to pay attention to this province, and voters expect it too. I think what voters in certain regions will find some more attention. So for example, we see the leaders particularly spending time in southwestern Ontario. So as the talk of manufacturing coming back, or as the loonie plummets, we see Londoners getting more attention, people in Kitchener-Cambridge getting more attention. That's where Thomas Mulcair was, I believe, just the other day. So I think we'll find that voters in certain parts of Ontario will also see more politicians coming through.
Now that's interesting, Mark, because you know, there's a lot of seats in southwestern Ontario that don't really feel like they're in play at all. You know, Windsor seats, there's not a lot of Windsor seats I wouldn't think that are going to be in play. There's some conservative parts of southwestern Ontario that are not going to be in play. So would the Southwest still be one of these regions where there's going to be extra special attention because of all of these factors?
Oh, absolutely.
It will be.
I think, you know, even if you look at the last provincial election here in Ontario, one of the key areas where, say, the NDP picked up a lot of support was in areas around like southwestern Ontario. There's a lot of potential there. I know the NDP sees that as an area of great potential, where there's actually, the battles tend to be more conservative NDP in some areas than conservative Liberal. So, I mean, that's one focus. I know the NDP in particular is looking at those areas, again, you know, where we might have lost some seats in the last provincial election in like Toronto. We picked up a lot of support there, and they've been building on the ground. So I think it's a key area. There's some interesting fights coming.
When you say we, you mean the former we, because you're a very nonpartisan person now.
Yes, of course.
Given that you're a school board trustee these days. Right, okay, I get it. John, does it make it more difficult on the political parties to create genuinely national platforms, given that, from what you're all telling me, there is going to be this extra special attention, even beyond what's normal, for some parts of the province of Ontario?
Well, I think the thing that's made things difficult for the parties is recent events. I mean, it's Harold Macmillan's Events Dear Boy. I mean, it looked to me in October like Mr. Harper was on a downward death slide, and events have very much moved in his favour. I think this on the economy, in particular, it's a kind of Goldilocks for him. It's not too hot and it's not too cold. I think if it had been if the things had been going too well, people might have taken a risk on somebody else. So, yeah, and the security file, again, that really has come to the top of mind, and it plays for Mr. Harper. So the plans which the Liberals, I think, had laid out are now in a little bit of disarray, and I think they've now got to respond to events. They have, their plan was really just wait till the campaign comes along, then we'll start unveiling policy. But I think people are now sitting around going, well, what would you do, Mr. Trudeau, if you were Prime Minister right now? And the silence has been the loud reply. So I think the way it's looking right now, there needs to be a re-evaluation of some of these plans. Obviously, the fiscal room is not there for the opposition parties. The government still maintains that it has room to make the family tax cuts that it had planned to do. And to some extent, their claims are bolstered by what the Parliamentary Budget Officer revealed in a report this week. He said that essentially, even with a sub $50 oil price, the Conservatives might see a $400 million deficit next year, which really, in the scheme of a $280 billion spending government, is not that much. So really, I think that's the real key change of late. A lot of these plans have, the best laid schemes of mice and men, as Robert Burns would say, have gone after gley.
Not only is that a lovely quote, but with that accent of yours, John, it really is just superb. Congratulations. That was
he's from my hometown, and it's Burns Day, so I'm obliged to say that.
Gotcha. Yes, you are. Anna, same issue to you. The plummeting revenues that we're seeing because the oil prices are going down, the loonie is worth so much less. How does, if at all, how does that change what the ballot question might be for people as they consider over the next 8 months who they want to vote for?
Yes. Well, I think there are a couple possibilities for the ballot question. One is whether voters are ready for change, whether they want to choose change. It's almost always, I think, the ballot question in many cases.
Who was the last guy who ran on Choose Change?
Yeah, it sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Some guy named McGinty,
yeah,
I think.
there's a ring to that one.
Worked for him. Worked for him 3 times, actually.
But, and then there's also sort of that question of who do you trust? So who do you trust with the public's money? And with economic changes, voters tend to prioritize sort of the economy in their evaluations of what's going on, and leaders. And voters also tend to be more retrospective when they think about the economy. So they kind of look back and say, am I better off now than I was 4 years ago? And for a number of Ontarians, they'll probably say, yes, things look better. I feel better, especially if I'm paying less for gas at the pumps. They have a little more money in their pockets.
So that'll help Stephen Harper.
So that can help the Conservatives, absolutely. But we can't forget that there are large swaths of the province that have not been doing well, which is, I think, why you have someone like Justin Trudeau who's caucusing in London, trying to bring attention to the fact that there are areas that have not done well. And I would just add a key point there too, is that Deb Matthews, who's a very prominent and powerful economic minister in the provincial government, was there. Yeah, but she was there with Justin Trudeau. And I think the provincial Liberals, part of their strategy is then to say, look at Ontarians, we've got a good relationship with the provincial Liberals. We know that Stephen Harper does not have that particular relationship, and we want to work together to ensure, to float the boat of Ontario.
It's, it's obviously not unheard of for the federal leader and the provincial leader to do stuff together. I know Tom Mulcair is in Sudbury helping campaign for the NDP candidate in the by-election that's going to be happening there next month. But the federal Liberal leader and the provincial Liberal premier are together almost all the time. They do stuff together a lot. What's the value in that, do you think?
Well, I mean, obviously there's a pretty popular Liberal premier here in Ontario right now, and I think Justin's hoping some of that wears off on him. It works for both of them. It can also work against them, though. I mean, in Ontario, I think when we very rarely see the same government in power federally as provincially, so that's a bit of an unusual turn. I do think that in this case, that can be a little dangerous. You have right now a premier who is, again, pretty popular, but she's facing some difficult choices and challenges as well. And so the question is, how quickly is that going to become apparent to voters here in Ontario? And when you see things like public assets being potentially sold off, some of those tough choices that she's going to be making over the next few months, maybe even, we'll see how that plays off. That can have a not a great effect when you're playing that close to your provincial and federal leader, right?
John, can I get you on that? Because obviously the Prime Minister, being Prime Minister, would tend not to campaign in a provincial election for his Conservative counterpart. So we haven't seen Stephen Harper, obviously, in Ontario elections for quite a while. And frankly, he's never had that close a relationship with any of the last few Conservative Party leaders anyway. Having said that, do you think it's a real help to have Kathleen Wynne and Justin Trudeau out there together? Does that help Justin Trudeau 8 months before an election?
Well, it is a bit of it could be bitter or it could be sweet. I mean, I think that, they met this morning, for example. They're obviously very tight and, they're joint planning sessions almost. And the speech which Kathleen Wynne gave in Ottawa last week or the week before was almost like a setup for Justin Trudeau. It was basically saying we need more money spent on infrastructure. And lo and behold, Justin Trudeau's main plank of his policy is infrastructure. So, yeah, they're helping one another, but it can be a hindrance. I remember, for example, when Paul Martin was Prime Minister and Dalton McGuinty brought in the health tax, which was maybe 2 months before the election in 2004, and the Liberals heard it at the door. The federal Liberals heard about the health tax at the door because the voter does not discriminate particularly. So, if Kathleen Wynne's got some pretty tough choices, and maybe Justin Trudeau doesn't want to be caught in the crossfire of some of those decisions.
Let's just consider where we are right now. We're a little over 8 months away. If the federal election is in October when the law says it's supposed to be, and if the Prime Minister doesn't go early, as he has a couple of times in the past, 8 months out, Marit, based on, you're having participated in a dozen campaigns or so, 8 months out, how much do you already know about what issues you want to campaign on, how the campaign is going to go, where you want the campaign to go? I mean, all of those details. What do they know right now?
No, I think all the parties know a fair amount about that right now. I mean, at this point, with a set election date, at the very least you've got only until October. You're going to have your planes booked, you're going to know where your tours are going for the most part, and ideally you're going to have your platform well in hand. I mean, in this case, it is an interesting time right now because we are seeing like Mulcair out there floating his platform and planks now, and as you mentioned earlier, that's kind of noticeably missing from Trudeau's plans right now. We don't know where they're headed, but realistically, we know that in the back rooms, they know where they're going. At the same time, they've got to be pretty nimble here because things like a turn in the economy, as we're seeing now, the price of oil, can really affect not just the fiscal reality they're heading into, but what voters are willing to buy.
Well, that's it, because Anna, I mean, even Tom Mulcair's got a lot of ink lately with the daycare promise that he's made, but it is contingent on the Treasury being flush. And he's even said that. He's not going to promise to do something if we can't afford to do it. So, again, they have some sense about what they want to do right now, 8 months out, but how much of that changes given a deteriorating loonie, a deteriorating price, or a lower price of gas, I should say, and all of the other changes?
Yes, well, again, I'm not really a strategist, so I wouldn't know exactly at what point they would make changes, but I think what we'll find is that parties will start being very careful about what they will start to promise. Whereas I think there could have been, we have this campaign commitment, we're going to announce it here and at this different time, and this is going to cost us $300 million. I think what we might find is there is a bit of a reining in of that and a rethink of any of the big promises they might make in order to wait and assess where the budget's going to be.
And don't forget, this also leaves our Conservative government in a bit of a bind because they have some big money promises that they have said they are going to carry out in this next budget. Income tax splitting. So, this is going to be a real problem for them. And the other parties are going to also be contending with similar issues, for sure.
John, you wanted to add?
Well, I was just going to say that on the big spending promises, Mulcair had mused last year about restoring the 6% escalator to health spending, and he was asked about that the other day, and he was noticeably less enthusiastic about that, which, given that it costs $30 billion over 9 years, is probably not a bad idea. But I think that everybody's having to take a little bit of a look at what they're promising, and Mulcair, for example, promised he would honour the childcare benefit that the Conservatives brought in, and that's a $5 billion pledge. So he doesn't have that much more money to play with.
John, back in the day, and by that I guess I mean before fixed election dates were a part of our regular political culture, you would not, 8 months out, see the kind of blatant, obvious election campaigning that we're already seeing now. Can you tell us how it's sort of changed what you're seeing now that you might not have seen 25 years ago?
For sure. Well, I mean, I think we all saw it in Ontario when McGuinty brought in the fixed election date. I guess that would have been after 2003. So, you know, by 2005, we knew we were going to be in another election, and it was pretty much campaign from then on. That has not been the case federally until this election. Although, you know, we were in a period of permanent election campaigning because of the minority government, but it was pretty much, it was a very different feel to what we've got now, where people are laying out a campaign out a year ahead of time. And, you know, for example, we saw Tom Mulcair this week, or last week, when he came back from the break, basically relaunch himself and his party. They had a terrible fall. As Prime Minister Harper's polling numbers rose, his fell. And, you know, they were eclipsed on the economy and security. So he's now put himself back in the middle of the debate, talking about the economy. They made promises to businesses earlier this week. And this is a very conscious decision to spend 8 months talking about this, trying to convince people that the NDP can be trusted with a $2 trillion economy.
Anna, can I get you to follow up on that? How are things different now when we know the election is going to be in October, as opposed to at the Prime Minister's whim? How's it changed the way campaigns now operate? We're 8 months out. What are you seeing now you wouldn't have seen 25 years ago?
Yeah, well, you're seeing things like their messages are tight and disciplined. They've worked on their slogan. Mr. Trudeau always, you know, every tag or tweet is hope and hard work, you know, so there's a real following of a certain script now, because they want to keep tight on their message and they want to exude a certain brand. And I think this is both fixed election date, but I would also say that this is because of the explosion of social media and how hard it is to control not only your message, but also when you're reaching out to people. So Twitter and Facebook and all these things were kind of post-Chrétien years, and even a little bit with just starting up with Martin. But Harper, when he came in, all of these things, all this social media was in place. So not only do you have 24/7 just traditional media, but now you have all this social media. So in order to control and in order to try to keep the messages that you want targeted to the voters that you're trying to reach, everything is now, I think, much more streamlined. And you would have lots of people talking about all kinds of different things 25 years ago. You'd hear from ministers, you would hear from candidates, and now you won't as much, you know, especially with the Conservatives. But I think we see much more. The NDP has certainly become much more disciplined in their machinery as well, and the Liberals. And I think this is just a fact now. I think it'll always be thinking about the next campaign. And we think, you know, Harper is very controlling, but I think even if it was Mr. Mulcair or Mr. Trudeau, it'll be degrees of that control because they are operating in this very new environment.
Marit, how, if you have to do this for the next 8 straight months, are you A, not going to bore the hell out of the Canadian electorate, and B, not going to run out of gas? I mean, your people can't go day in and day out for 8 straight months with the, a lead foot, right?
Yeah.
Pedal to the metal.
Yeah. Well, you know, I mean, we just came out of a mayoral race here.
Right.
And it's really not that different from that, right? Like we know when it's going to end at the longest. I mean, we know where it could potentially end in October. So, you know, it's all out right now. And I think that it is a lot like those municipal campaigns where we have those set election dates and we see that the challenge is in keeping the momentum going, right? Yeah. And holding back enough that you have something new to present at a critical moment. And also for less experienced campaigns, I think it'll be a challenge for Trudeau, for example, because I think that it is, it's something that, you know, you need a lot of campaign experience to handle, you know, the kind of media that you get during a campaign period. That's going to be continuing. I mean, even if we don't have the election till October, the summer is going to be like hard campaign time there, and the media scrutiny that the leaders are going to be under is going to be very intense from the get-go.
And this is Harper's 5th campaign as leader,
right?
And this is Mulcair's 1st, and this is Trudeau's 1st.
Yeah.
So I think especially for the NDP and the Liberals, they will have to be careful about their leaders because they have not undergone the scrutiny that Harper is very familiar with during a campaign.
Whether you like him or you don't, the public know Stephen Harper.
Exactly.
He's been around for a long time.
Right.
And once they get bored, that's when you know that your message has gotten through. I mean, I think once the voters get bored with your message, you realize that it's probably resonated with them.
There is always, John, a danger in overlearning the lessons of the last campaign and applying them to the next campaign. But having said that, I'm sure it has not escaped the views of the people who are in the back rooms of what happened last June and the fact that for the first time in 40 years we had a rookie leader win an election in the province of Ontario. Hadn't happened since 1971. Take note, Justin Trudeau and Tom Mulcair. If you want to be a rookie and win, maybe you should be talking to some of Kathleen Wynne's people. Having said that, what came out of that summer 2014 election campaign, which ended in a Liberal majority government, that you think the parties might be interested in as it relates to this October's federal election?
Well, I'm not sure that there'll be too many lessons taken from the Wynne campaign. I mean, I think she ran against Tim Hudak. If she'd run against nobody, she probably would have lost. So, you know,
You're
I think
harsh,
it was more
John.
to do with
You're
the
very
ineptitude of the ineptitude of the Hudak campaign than the brilliance of the Wynne campaign. Although, you know, to give them their due, they managed to keep the discussion away from the gas plants and other things that might have harmed her. But I think it was mainly to do with her, you know, a bright, fresh personality and the fact that Tim Hudak's campaign just was pitched very badly. I think on the point previously made about Mulcair being a rookie, I don't think really that's a concern. I mean, he is a very, very seasoned operator, and he performed extraordinarily well in front of cameras and in front of journalists. Mr. Trudeau, though, I saw yesterday in question period, I don't know how many people watched it, but, you know, Mulcair and Harper went at it like old pros and ad-libbed and you know, faux outrage, and it was a pretty good spectacle. And then Mr. Trudeau stood up and asked a question about the income splitting, how it would only benefit wealthy families like his and Mr. Harper's. Now, he's used this line before. Mr. Harper knew it was coming. He zinged him back with a line about not everybody's got a trust fund. And at this point, Mr. Trudeau should have pivoted away or done something, gone to plan B. But he then proceeded to ask the same question in French, and he got zinged all over again. And I think if that had been a television debate with the three of them, that would have been a knockout punch. People would have looked at him and gone, wow, you know, he's maybe not quite there yet. And I think that they've really need to use the 8 months to get him up to speed against these two really seasoned, formidable operators.
Let me ask Mart about one of those seasoned operators, Tom Mulcair, and whether or not there's a lesson from the last NDP campaign in Ontario. As you know, Andrea Horwath came under a considerable amount of criticism for where her party did not do well, namely City of Toronto, because the argument was she strayed too far from her base, too populist, too many small C conservative elements in the platform. Toronto didn't go for it, although she did extremely well in other parts of the province, we have to add. Is there a lesson for Tom Mulcair in any of that?
Oh, absolutely. I think that actually a lot of Mr. Mulcair's bringing out some of these promises quite early, especially things like the $15 a day childcare plan, are really also about speaking to your base, making sure, sending that clear message, hey, I'm the guy you know, I'm the same guy who was in the party alongside Jack Layton, and I'm going to take you in that direction. And I think that's a really important message that any leader can't forget is their base. That's the folks that are going to actually get the vote out, translate those check marks on everybody, all the canvassers' lists into actual votes on election day. And so you can't forget those people. And I think that is a central message that I think Tom Mulcair and the NDP federally have absolutely received. But at the same time, you got to look for new areas. And one of the things that Andrea Horwath did, and I think it worked in some ways and not so well in others, certainly, was to seek out new votes in new areas that hadn't been so strong for the NDP. We talked earlier about the Southwest, and I think you also have to keep that in mind. And that's why I think Mulcair was out talking this week about things like small businesses, making things a little easier there, talking about manufacturing sector and incentives. And so, again, like not taking for granted your base, but looking for new vote opportunities.
Even the CFIB, Canadian Federation of Independent Business, liked what Mulcair had to say on small business.
Sure, yeah.
And I got about 30 seconds left here. We have in the province of Ontario 103 MPs right now. It's going to 118, I think, right? Before the next election, they're getting 15 more seats? Or is it 121? 121. Can you tell on the basis of where those seats are, which party would tend to be more favored?
Seems to be split at the moment. So there are about 7 seats, sort of if you think about Halton, Cambridge, Hamilton, those areas seem to be leaning a little more conservative. And the other 8 appear to be more competitive seats in York Region, in Toronto, some in Peel. But again, They're new.
Who knows?
And who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows? And some of these ministers or MPs have switched over to, ridings have been split. They've gone to one and not the other. So you'll have voters also who may not recognize who they are. So I think the dynamics will be very, very interesting this election.
As has this discussion been. John Iveson, thanks so much for being with us in the nation's capital. Anna Esselman and Marit Stiles here in Toronto. It's good to have all three of you on the program again.
Great, thank
So
you.
long.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.